guys, welcome back to the channel. Tiffany here with another tutorial, and this one's actually gonna be for a really long time requested cosplay that y'all have been dying for me to make, and that's going to be Angewomon from the anime Digimon. And specifically, I'm gonna be going over how I made her helmet. Yee! And in this video, I'm gonna be going over how I made this full helmet and the feathers and how I see out of it and how I wear it. But before we begin, remember to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Now, let's go. For making this helmet, I actually got a sponsorship with Anycubic specifically for their new resin printer. And my focus would be making this out of resin instead of my usual route for helmets, which would be on an FDM printer. And just like any of my 3D models, I first started in a program called Rhino to get all of my basic lines. I also ended up segmenting this helmet into 5 different pieces so that way it would fit on my resin bed, and then imported it into another program called Nomad Sculpt to add all of the fine details as well as add all of the texture onto the horizontal and vertical bands. And you can find my finished CAD file for this on my website, tiffanygourdencosplay.com, link in the description. Then I put it into the Anycubic slicer program, and I'll note for resin prints, I do like to hollow them out. That way they are less heavy. And I did this through their slicer program, as well as when you hollow out any resin piece, you do need to put drainage holes. So I did that all onto the back side of the helm and printed the piece using Anycubic standard resin V2. And I actually ended up having a really bad line on one of the main helmet print parts. And this was user error, nothing wrong with the printer, but I had to clean this up. And because of how bad this line was, I ended up having to get out my orbital sander to sand it away. I actually do not recommend this as it creates so much resin dust. It is a safety hazard, so you do need to wear all of your proper safety gear, respirator, have filters in the room just to collect all of that dust. But by doing this process, it did give me a really lovely texture onto the surface that helped to emulate the metal-like feel of this helmet. And with all resin prints, you do need to cure each of these pieces, whether you use an actual curing machine or you can use a UV flashlight, which is what I like to do with my resin prints, doing it onto each of the pieces. Reminder, safety gear. And then for assembling each of the pieces, I'm going to be doing a process called resin welding. For doing this process, you first will want to temporarily bond your pieces together. And I like to use super glue, starting off with the main helm 2 pieces. And once it was attached, I then got the same exact resin that I used to print the piece. And I ended up getting a tool that had a metal point and put it onto the tip, and then would put that tip onto the line where the 2 pieces attached. Then apply only a small amount at a time and grab that UV flashlight, and then you will cure that one section. You're going to basically be mimicking what your resin printer does, and it puts a small amount of resin at a time and cures each piece to make the final form. So you don't want to use the resin and fill the piece, you want to slowly add layers to create a strong bond. I then repeated this for the horizontal and vertical little strips, applying the super glue to the back part of the vertical one first, and then putting it into its designated slot, and then proceeded to do resin welding around the sides of this. This is also going to mimic the same look when you solder metal together. And then repeated for the horizontal ones. And I'll note that the horizontal ones will sit right above the slits that I have in the CAD file. So if you do this, make sure to practice where you are going to set it first, so that way you do not cover up the slits so you can still see. And the last part of the fabrication is just doing a little rough up of where all of the resin weld was. This way it won't be such a smooth texture, and it'll match the rest of the surface. And I just did this with some 220 grit sandpaper to complete this. And then to my favorite part of painting. And I'm going to be using my HP TH2 airbrush provided by Iwata Airbrush and paint provided by Createx Colors. Starting off with the Auto-Born Sealer Black. And this paint is specifically designed for applying onto smooth and plastic-like surfaces, so resin prints, for example. And this is going to make it where once it dries, all of the paint that you apply afterwards will have a better surface to stick onto. Then I grabbed the Quicksilver paint and did a light dusting over all of it, followed by some of the more broader areas. I ended up going closer with the airbrush to add more pigment and make it look like it was more shiny and had more of the silver. And once the paint was dry, I masked all of the silver sections using masking tape. And I would recommend whenever you apply masking tape to a airbrush painted area, you do want to put that tape onto your leg first before applying it to the surface, as the adhesive on most masking tape is a bit too strong and you do not want to have it peel the paint off once you are done. Then I switched to metallic copper, and this color is going to be a very strong color onto the surface. But with airbrush painting, it is all about painting with layers, and I want the undertone to have this copper-like feeling once we apply our next color, which is Quicksilver. And for this, I just did a light dusting, just enough so that way the copper would still shine through and give that look. And when that was dry, it was time to remove all of the masking tape, but I felt afterwards that the piece, it was a little lifeless. It needed a bit more shadowing, more of that anime-like feel. So I ended up with a paintbrush, and painting by hand, I used the airbrush paint color black and went around all of the edges, all of the rivets to bring it to life. And the very last step I always do when painting is to seal the piece, and I use Createx Colors UVLS Satin. Now for the feathers! And there's a lot of ways I could have made these feathers, but I wanted them to match the look that I did for the wings. And the material that I used was Foss Shape, which was provided by Coscom Cosplay Supply. And I traced my pattern for the feathers onto Foss Shape 300, and if you want that pattern, I have it on my website, link below. Then cut them out, and using a heat tool, heated up the feathers, which causes the Foss Shape to shrink slightly and become more stiff. And while it is still slightly warm, I ended up folding it, doing a crease down the center, so that way it would have that feather-like feel. Then for attaching each of the feathers together, I used Shore Bonder hot glue, a small strip of the glue onto the bottom section, slowly stacking the 3 feathers on each side together, and then applying a heavy glop amount into the section that I have designated on the helm for the feathers to be inserted into to finish this out. And as I said in the beginning of this video, and you might have noticed while I was going over how I made this, I can see through this helmet. And there are actually 2 slits I designed in this file to make it so you can see through it, right under here. And basically I have pretty good vision from here to here, but when it comes to going down, I can't. So I have to look to actually see through the slits. As well as how I attach this to wear it while I'm in cosplay, I ended up attaching 2 pieces of Velcro using hot glue, and these correlate to the actual wig and head cowl that I wear. This thing, which looks kind of creepy, but it looks a lot better when it's on. And basically, I made this fabric head cowl with a zipper down the back, and I attached my wig to it. And then once I figured out the placement of where I wanted the helmet to sit, I ended up hot gluing a ton right here and applying my Velcro. All of this hair is permanent in place right here, so it will not move, and it is pretty sturdy and holds the helmet with no problem. I can fully just do whatever, no issues with the helmet coming off. made Angewomon's helmet from the anime Digimon. And I hope this video was helpful for you for making your own version, or maybe using some of the information that I had in this tutorial for helping you make another costume or prop. And if you found this video helpful, remember to like this video and subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with all of my latest cosplay tutorials. Leave me a comment below on what cosplay you want me to make next, as this one I ended up pushing up my timeline and making this way sooner than I had anticipated, because there was just so many people requesting this specific character for me to cosplay. So let me know in the comments. Your feedback is very, very grateful and helps me decide what I should do. A big thank you to all of my company sponsors here on YouTube, as well as all of my members, specifically those legendary members who financially help to support me so I can continue doing this as my full-time job and bringing you more tutorials like this. And I'll see you for our next one, so stay tuned.